How much should you spend on LinkedIn ads? Over the past 6.5 years, I've spoken to over 500 B2B marketing managers looking to run paid media. And the question I get almost exclusively from those looking to start is, what is the recommended minimum budget amount? And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how much that is, down to the penny. And I'm not even going to use the words "it depends." So yeah, it's going to be pretty hard. First things first, we need to understand who you're targeting. Now, are you targeting US-based chief technology officers of Fortune 500 companies, or are you targeting small business owners based in the UK? Unsurprisingly, who you are looking to target has one of the biggest impacts on how much you need to spend, as the price is determined by the market and how much others are willing to pay for that exact same impression. Now, there's a lot of other factors, and I'll link to that list at the end of how you can get the cheapest LinkedIn ads, all of this stuff with relevancy score and everything included. But for this example, let's look at CTOs, and the cost for targeting them would be around £100 CPM, and the UK small business owners would cost around 50 CPM. Oh yeah, and if you don't know, CPM stands for cost per mil, and mil means thousand in French, so it's cost per thousand, not million like I used to think back in the early days. Anyway, quick French lesson. Now, before you do any budgeting, I recommend building this audience out either natively within LinkedIn or using third-party lists. Then using that audience, create a test campaign using the brand awareness objective. You can then scroll down and see the recommended CPM amount. From that one, just take the one on the left, which is the lowest one. Now, on a side note, we don't typically use the brand awareness objective or really listen to the lowest bid recommendations. These settings for this test campaign are purely to get a CPM estimate at this stage, as the other settings will give you a manual cost per click, which at this stage is not that handy when building out how much we need to spend. Okay, so for this example, let's make the maths easier and say it's £50 CPM or cost per milli. Next, we need to look at audience size. Now, say you've gone out there and found your perfect audience or your ideal customer persona, and there's around 30,000 people sitting in the UK of that audience. Now, that's a pretty nice size. Now, with a £50 CPM, we would need to spend around 1,500, I think if my maths is correct, to reach your whole audience. Now, this is where the nuance comes in, because the first consideration is we don't just want to reach the audience once. Most people don't buy, especially B2B products, after seeing one ad. Well, most of the time anyway. It could be a really good ad. And even though these people may have received technically one impression, there is a certain amount of channel friction, which means they probably haven't seen the ad at all and haven't actually registered you guys exist as a company. Now, on top of how many impressions we want to serve this audience, we also need to keep into account something called audience penetration. If you go into the LinkedIn ads interface, you can see under the delivery tab a metric which is audience penetration. Now, simply put, this just shows you what percentage of your 30,000 person audience your ads has reached. And what we found, especially within the first touchpoint audience, is that the number usually lingers around 50%. Unless you have a massive audience, then it's typically quite a lot lower. And this really does make sense, because at least half of the people who have created a LinkedIn account, who technically sit within your ideal customer persona list within here, never actually log on to LinkedIn. I mean, not everyone's like us. So in theory, your 30,000 audience is now around 15,000, which means if we look back to how much you have to spend to get in front of them once, you'd only have to spend around £750 to reach each person with one impression. But like I said, we don't want to do that. So what we recommend as a minimum is targeting an average impression share of around 4 impressions per month, which would be £750 times 4, which would lead us to about £3,000. Now, obviously, the more active users within your target demographic are going to get more impressions, and the less active ones are going to get fewer. But there's not really much we can do about that. It's just kind of the dynamic of how these ad platforms work. So with an audience size of 30K and £50 CPM, you should be spending roughly £3,000 per month. And I think this is a really good rule for campaigns which fall around a similar CPM. And for every 10,000 audience size, you should be looking to spend at least £1,000 on ad spend to make sure your impressions per user are in a good place, which combats channel friction, as well as gives them a chance to actually see your ad in the feed. But unfortunately, LinkedIn typically recommends audiences no smaller than 50K, or it flashes up saying, recommend make this audience bigger. And the reality is most B2B marketing budgets for LinkedIn ads aren't over $5,000. So companies are kind of setting off on the wrong foot and fighting really an uphill battle from the get-go. And I think the motto of this story is don't spread your budget too thin, otherwise you're literally just shouting in to the void. But there is more to this question than just how much you're willing to spend as a budget. We also need to take into account industry, creative type, landing page experience, expected click-through rate, chosen objective, and campaign structure to really make sure you guys are getting the most out of your media spend. So I guess going back to the beginning, it really does depend. But if you do want to learn more about LinkedIn Ads Relevancy Score and all this stuff above to be able to get the cheapest clicks possible to make sure that your media budget is going as far as it possibly can, we do a deep dive in the video, which I'll link to here. But until then, guys, have a nice day and happy media buying. God, I hate the word media buying.